The Last Letter, a World War I story. The Call to Arms, August 1914, Lancashire, England. Private William Hargreaves had never considered himself a soldier. At 19, he worked as an apprentice blacksmith, shaping iron into horseshoes and tools, never thinking that one day he'd be holding a rifle instead of a hammer. But when Britain declared war on Germany, the call to arms swept through the country like wildfire. Young men, eager for adventure and blinded by patriotism, rushed to enlist. William was no different. "It'll be over by Christmas," they told him. His mother cried as he left. His father, a veteran of the Boer War, merely patted him on the shoulder. "Keep your head down, son," he said. "And never volunteer for anything." By September, William found himself in northern France, part of the British Expeditionary Force, marching toward Belgium. The roads were clogged with refugees, families with carts filled with everything they owned, dragging weary children behind them. The sight unsettled him, but his commanding officer urged them on. The enemy was near. The hell of the trenches, December 1914, Ypres, Belgium. The war was nothing like they had imagined. The quick victory promised by the newspapers had turned into a bloody stalemate. William now lived in a trench, a narrow, mud-filled scar carved into the earth, stretching for miles. The smell of damp rot, sweat, and death clung to everything. Rats the size of cats scurried over corpses, gnawing at unburied flesh. Shells screamed overhead day and night, exploding with deafening force, shaking the ground as though the earth itself were groaning in agony. The trenches were deep enough to hide in but shallow enough that stray bullets could still find you if you weren't careful. His unit, the 2nd Battalion of the Lancashire Fusiliers, had been holding the line for weeks, barely sleeping, surviving on stale biscuits and tins of corned beef. Frostbite chewed at their toes, and the persistent rain turned everything into a thick, sucking swamp of mud, but the worst part wasn't the cold or the hunger. It was the waiting. The Germans were just a few hundred yards away, their own trenches mirroring the British lines. At night, William could sometimes hear their voices, laughing, coughing, whispering. They were boys like him, caught in the same nightmare. Then came the orders. A push was coming. Over the top, March 1915, no man's land. The whistle blew. William's stomach clenched as he gripped his rifle, fingers trembling. The officers screamed for them to go. He climbed the trench ladder, emerging into the chaos of no man's land, a wasteland of shattered trees, barbed wire, and bodies. The moment his boots hit the mud, machine guns opened fire. The man beside him crumpled, his helmet flying off, a red mist where his face had been. William ran, his heartbeat hammering against his ribs. The German trenches were barely visible through the smoke and chaos. A shell exploded nearby, hurling him to the ground. He landed face first in the mud, ears ringing. When he tried to push himself up, he realized his left arm was numb. Blood seeped through his sleeve. Around him, men screamed, some dragging themselves toward cover, others lying still. The attack had failed. The survivors crawled back to their trenches, dragging the wounded with them. William barely made it, collapsing into the safety of the trench as medics rushed to tend to the injured. He had survived, this time. The Christmas truce, December 1915, the Western Front. The war dragged on. More battles. More death. More friends lost, but on Christmas Eve, something unexpected happened. Across no man's land, the Germans began singing Still Now. The familiar tune, Silent Night, drifted through the cold air. Slowly, hesitantly, British voices joined in, then came the lanterns. William watched in disbelief as German soldiers emerged from their trenches, unarmed, hands raised in peace. Cautiously, the British did the same. They met in the middle, laughing, shaking hands, exchanging cigarettes and chocolate. A German soldier showed William a photograph of his wife and newborn son. For a few precious hours, they were not enemies. Just men. By morning, the officers had put a stop to it. The war resumed. But for the rest of his life, William never forgot that one fleeting moment of peace amid the madness. The last letter, November 1916, the Somme, the war had changed William. He no longer believed in glory, only survival. The Battle of the Somme had raged for months. The British had gained little, despite the thousands sacrificed. His unit was ordered forward once again, into the meat grinder. Before the assault, he sat down to write a letter. Dearest mother, I do not know if this letter will reach you. The war has taken so many of us, and I feel my luck is running thin. But know this, I fought not for medals, nor for kings, but for the men beside me. I miss home. I miss the sound of the forge, the smell of coal on a winter morning. If I do not return, know that I was thinking of you. Tell father I understand now why he never spoke of war. If I should fall, bury me not in anger, but in love, your son, William. The next morning, the whistle blew, he went over the top, and he never came back. 1918, Lancashire, England, the war ended. But the world had changed forever. In a small village in England, a mother sat by the fire, clutching a worn letter with shaking hands. Her son's name was carved into a stone memorial, along with hundreds of others who never returned. The war had taken him, but his words remained.